You're listening to Quorum Radio.
Good evening and good morning to our friends in the U.S., in Canada, listening to the French islands of Saint Pierre and Miquelon in the North Atlantic. Greetings to those on ships, to those listening on planes. Greetings also to those listening in Greenland, Iceland, Ireland, the Faroe Islands, the Hebrides, the Orkney Islands, the Shetland Islands, those in Scotland, England, Wales, the Isle of Man, Channel Islands, and points beyond. This is Quorum Radio. Today on Quorum Radio, we speak to exorcist priest Father Carlos Martins of the extremely popular The Exorcist Files podcast, discussing his true life adventures delivering people from demonic oppression, demonic infestation, and demonic possession. Stay tuned.
Say you don't know me. I recognize my...
Hey folks, Quorum Radio now on with Father Carlos Martins. He's a priest, and they've recently launched, him and his team, something called The Exorcist Files. We wanted to have Father Carlos Martins on to talk about this. Just to give you a background on him, Father Carlos Martins is a leading exorcist of the Catholic Church, and throughout his 2 decades of ministry and service, he's helped set people free all over the world. He also leads something called Treasures of the Church, which is a ministry of evangelization of the Catholic Church, helping people experience God through encounters with relics. That's right, with relics, and we'll ask him about that. And recently, Father Martins and his team began the podcast I mentioned, directed at the under 30 demographic that has found itself immersed more and more into the world of New Age beliefs, practices, and spiritual dangers. These are the famous no-nays, people that just don't, young people that don't consider themselves affiliated with any church, basically spiritually adrift, and especially vulnerable. The podcast that I mentioned, of course, The Exorcist Files, can be checked out on Spotify. Father Martins, is it on any other platforms?
It's on every podcast platform. So it's on Apple Podcasts, wherever people get their podcasts. But certainly if they don't know how to do that, they can go onto the website exorcistfiles.tv, and in the fact question, in the fact page of the website, there will be instructions on how they can connect.
So, Father, tell us, first of all, how does an atheist, at one time you were an atheist, right? How does a one-time atheist become an exorcist priest?
Yeah, well, presumably there was a conversion somewhere there in between. And
I hope so.
That took place in 1996. And 1996, when I was midway through my undergraduate degree, I converted. And how that came about is, although I was an atheist, I was not a happy atheist, in the sense that I knew, I was able to recognize that we were wired to want God. We're wired to want to live forever, and the human animal desires hope, and the thought of our existence coming to an end is repulsive. I was honest enough to recognize that. At the same time, I met a small group of professors, a small group of students while I was at college, and they lived their faith in a beautiful and marvelous way. They just exuded a peace, and that peace was powerfully attractive. And the anecdote that I like to tell people is that one morning I was having coffee on campus with one of these students, and I was sitting across from him. It was about 11 in the morning. We were at a small round table that are commonly found in coffee shops everywhere. Sure. And as we're talking with one another, somebody comes in and informs him that his car was stolen out of the parking lot that morning. It was joyridden behind campus and slammed into an oak tree on somebody's lawn, and that his car was now hugging that oak tree. The car was garbage. So he receives that news, and he turns and faces me again, and he says, well, I guess it just wasn't God's will for me to have a car right now. And he could still enjoy the cup of coffee in front of him. I was astounded. I've never seen that kind of nonchalantness about, earthly things and possessions and so forth. I mean, at the time, I had a car, and if my car had become garbage, like that would have been, in a sense, the end of the world for me. So these people just had a way of living that was powerfully attractive. They exuded a peace, and that peace was a witness. And although I didn't believe that observing the way they lived and observing this piece made me recognize they have something I don't have and that I would like to have. Although at the same time, the atheism I had was an intellectual conclusion. So it was not based on a political view. It was not based on the fact, well, if I subscribe to God, then I've got to subscribe to a morality, and I don't want to do that. So there was no agenda in me. But I looked at the way that the world is constructed, and I thought, well, atheism is the only reasonable, rational conclusion. And it came down to three issues for me. If God exists, why is there so much evil in the world? Why can the little 11-year-old girl down the street be kidnapped and murdered? If you were God, would you permit that in your world? And I wouldn't. If God exists, why are there so many different religions, each one contradicting the next? If you were God, would you permit different religions in your world? I wouldn't. And finally, the third one, and this was the big one. This was the hammer. If God exists, why does he hide himself? Why doesn't he just peel back the sky, so to speak, and reveal his existence? If you were God, would you hide yourself? I wouldn't. And so given these three states of affairs, I thought it is impossible that an all-good, all-knowing, all-loving God exists, because these states of affairs wouldn't exist. They're incompatible with the existence of God. And so I saw these students and the small group of professors living the way they did, and I thought, like, holy smokes, like, these guys are not stupid. I'm in class with them. I can see that they're rational. Yet how in heaven's name are they coming to a different conclusion than I have? I mean, didn't they read the memo? And so I couldn't get past the fact within myself that their witness was powerfully attractive. And so when one of them invited me on a Eucharistic adoration retreat, and what that means is, for Catholics, they take Jesus in John chapter 6 at his word, at his literal word, that when he identifies himself as the bread of life, at the Eucharist, or what we would call the Blessed Sacrament in the church, different names for the same thing, that he is substantially present. He is in the Eucharist. He is the Eucharist. And so when Catholics adore the Eucharist, they believe they're adoring God. And so in the host, in the bread that has been consecrated by the priest at Mass, God is substantially present in a literal way, not in a symbolic way. And so they were organizing a retreat for this, and one of them had the courage to invite me to attend. And so I went. And on that retreat, on one of the times that I was allotted to be in the chapel and to adore the Eucharist, which I just, as soon as that endeavor happened, as soon as I found myself at that retreat house, I just wanted to bolt, because it all of it hit me. What in heaven's name are you doing here? These people believe in something you don't, and you don't belong here. And
how long did that take? Excuse me, Father, how long did that conclusion arise in your mind? Like after 15 minutes, 15 seconds? Immediately.
No, about half a second. So the Eucharist is in the chapel. It was exposed, and it was a 24-hour a day adoration. So in other words, until your next man relieved you after 1 hour, you couldn't leave. Right? The Eucharist is never left alone. When it's exposed for adoration, there has to be an adorer. So there were 6 of us on this retreat, and 24 hours a day divided by 6 men means 4 hours per man. Now, not even the strictest religious order in the church has its members adore the Eucharist each and every day for 4 hours. But anyway, for this 3-day retreat, that's what was scheduled. And so in the first shift of adoration in the chapel, as luck would have it, or grace, who do you think the first adorer was scheduled to be? Yours truly. So I'm there in the chapel, and as soon as everybody else piled out and I'm there alone, it just hit, like, it took a second. Like, what in heaven's name are you doing here? I'm looking at what appeared to me, what appeared to my senses to be nothing more than a cracker set out in a fancy container, in a fancy display in order to be worshipped. And I plotted my escape. I thought, how in heaven's name can I get out of here? And so this was 96. This is before cell phones became ubiquitous. And so in other words, I couldn't fake that there was a phone call, an emergency that I received and I had to leave. I thought, if I were to say, look, I forgot something, well, there were lots of stores around. You could always go buy whatever it is that you forgot. So I could do, and then to have this, to have kind of an excuse to say, well, look, I'm not feeling well. I'm ill. I just had too much respect for these students to lie to them. I just couldn't bring myself to just tell a lie. So I made the decision, well, I committed myself to be here for 3 days. I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I'm going to stay. And then I did the most honest action that I had ever done in my life. I got down on my knees and I just said, God, I don't know if you're here or not. And I don't believe you are. And in this moment, as I'm doing this, I feel, I feel the equivalent as if I'm kneeling. It would be the equivalent feeling as if you're kneeling in front of a tree, kneeling in front of any inanimate object and talking to it. But I said, I don't know if you're here or not. I don't believe that you are. But if you are, please reveal yourself to me. And if you do, I will give you my life. If you will give me what I see, the faith that I see in these men, if you can give me the joy and the peace that I see in them, then you will be the center of my life, because there will be nothing as good as this. And so what happened next was, sensually speaking, in terms of the senses, nothing. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. And what did happen, though, was there was a tiny sense of peace that came. It was far from being overwhelming. And it was alongside still of a kind of an anxiety of being within this chapel for 4 hours a day for the next 3 days. It was alongside the anxiety of accomplishing this what I saw as a Herculean task. But nevertheless, I was surprised how quickly it was that this hour went by. During my next shift, 6 hours later, that peace grew. It still was far from being overwhelming, but it was now larger. It was now it was more robust. It was certainly way more significant. And I was surprised yet again how quickly this time that hour went by. By the third shift, which began at 3 a.m. for me, I walked into that chapel an atheist and I came out a believer. And what occurred was, again, nothing extraordinary in terms of the senses, but all of a sudden I knew I was in front of Almighty God, that I was created in love, and that love itself was in communion with me now. And I was staring at love, and it was absolutely overwhelming. It was not emotional in the sense of, it wasn't a feeling that came over me, but an absolute plenitude of an awareness and a conviction. And from that time, I was I have been a believer and have not abandoned the faith since. I've never doubted even for 1 second.
It reminds me, Father, let me just jump in 1 second. I'm thinking about that passage of scripture. I don't know which chapter and verse or which of the four Gospels, but where Christ says, "Verily, I tell you, my flesh is real food, my blood is real drink." Right. He's emphatic about it.
John chapter 6, yeah.
I was amazing, and a number of his disciples were scandalized, and they no longer followed him. And he didn't issue a clarification like he did with Lazarus. I mean, Lazarus is asleep. No, okay, right, he's dead, but I'm gonna show my power now. That didn't happen. No clarification. He let him go, and that's it.
Right. He stared at them in the eyes and he challenged them. He said, "Will you too also leave?"
So we now know how you went from atheist to believer. How did you then go from believer to priest?
Right. Well, so I had that came on another retreat. Retreats are powerful experiences, and God certainly, quote unquote, shows up on retreats. They are times when God certainly reveals himself. If someone who takes a retreat seriously will always encounter God. And so that happened 7 years after that retreat where I converted from atheism. I went on a separate retreat. And this one was, in a sense, much more, it was equally powerful, but not quite maybe as climactic as the first one. It was during the course of this week-long retreat on Tuesday morning, June the 3rd, 2003 at 10:18 in the morning. I heard literally the voice of God. I literally heard the words kind of rip through me. "Carlos, join the priesthood. I promise to make you very happy."
Oh, wow.
And in that moment, I had a career going. I was a teacher at the time, loved teaching. I never, ever foresaw teaching. I never, ever foresaw leaving teaching, I should say. And in that moment, I was happily willing and glad to hand in my resignation. And so that began my course on the road to the priesthood. I completed 6 years of seminary. And even in the time when I was a seminarian, I was already involved in deliverance ministry, just in assisting priests. And as a deacon, so before my ordination as a priest, in the year that I was a deacon, I was assigned at a parish that had the resident diocesan exorcists residing there. And they were so busy with possession cases, that when something less than possession came in, like a house infestation, where the demonic is present in a house and the things are moving by themselves, there's voices, there's violence, like poltergeist phenomena, let's call it,
right,
in the house, they sent me to go deal with it. Now, I had no training at the time, and I would never advise this to be the case, to send somebody into a situation with the devil without training, because it's very easy to get yourself hurt, let's say. But I went in, and I had this there was just an innate awareness that if the devil is present in a place, then he has been given the rights to be there, that the devil doesn't just show up because he chooses to, or yesterday everything was fine in my house, today it's not, and the cause or the reason for that is just completely unknown. The stars were aligned in a certain configuration, or the price of bananas hit a certain level, and boom, that brings me to trouble. So that I knew that there had to be a door opened to him, and he was let in. And so that knowledge is what guided me to lead people through reforming their lives or undoing whatever decisions that they had done that brought evil into a relationship with them.
Wow. So, I mean, this is pretty amazing. So you were at the time, I guess, in the Detroit Archdiocese, or whereabouts were you when you were, I guess you were a seminarian, right? When this happened?
Yeah, I was.
Before you became a priest?
I was in the Archdiocese of Houston, Galveston, Houston, within Texas.
Okay. Wow. So they it's like, hey, anybody know how to swim? Okay, you're lifeguard today.
Right. It was just a matter of, the necessity. And there was nobody else around. They were just short of personnel. And
so Father.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. So, yeah. 127 Main Street. Over there. Yeah, that house with the shutters. That's the place. And they gave you a book and said, just go there and get rid of that infestation. It was like that, or what? No coaching.
Yeah, no, it was exactly like that. It was there was no coaching, and that was a matter of, there were at the time 2 exorcists dealing with this enormous archdiocese, and the archdiocese with millions of people and the surrounding dioceses, they didn't have assigned exorcists at the time.
Oh my God!
They were sending everybody to Houston, so there was just no time. There was no time for them to see everybody that was requesting to see them.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
When something lesser came in, they were just looking, look, deal with this. Like, here you go. Here's the number. Here's the address. Contact the person and deal with this. What I did was I grabbed holy water and I grabbed a book containing the prayers of the exorcism of a place. They didn't give them to me, but I just thought, okay, what do I need? So I went and obtained what I needed to do that. And I arrived at the place, and I knew immediately when so it was a woman who asked me to come and deliver her plates for Vivo. The home was not her own. It was her uncle's home, and he at the time was deployed overseas. And
right.
As she's her own home had burned to the ground. And so he had, because he wasn't around living in his place, he just said to his niece, come use my place, it's yours. I won't be back home for another couple of years or so. And by that time, presumably she'd be back on her feet. But as soon as I showed up at her house and she opened the door, I remember taking a step inside, and the ceiling fan started to spin. So it went from a dead stop position, but it started to spin not like a ceiling fan would. It started to spin at 10 million RPMs. I mean, spinning so quickly that every object in the room that wasn't weighed down started to blow around, move, to fall to the floor, because the sheer amount of wind that was created in the room by this fan, that the propellers were spinning so quickly, the fan blades were spinning so quickly that it was just a blur. It almost looked like nothing was there. So, and then all of a sudden, it stopped on a dime, like instant stop. And then it started spinning backwards at the same speed. And then it stopped and then just started to spin slowly, like at maybe 2 rotations per minute. And then quickly again, spinning so quickly that
like a propeller.
Yeah.
A plane.
Well, like a plane prop. So, okay, the devil's here. He's obviously not shy about his presence here. So I just went to the counter in the kitchen. I started to make holy water. I had her go fill a bowl with water from the tap, and I just set about doing the prayers. When I was done those prayers, or towards the end, then I heard the chiming of a music box. And this was the phenomena that for her was the most unnerving. There was a music box in her uncle's bedroom sitting on his dresser. And it would go off at random times each and every day. And the thing that was unnerving is it's not electrical. So it's not plugged into a wall, and nobody's winding it. So how is this thing getting its power? She had removed the turn key from it, the winding key. She thought, if this thing is somehow winding itself, or something is somehow managing to wind it, well, if I remove the key, then it would stop chiming. But it didn't stop chiming, it just kept going. She tried to remove the thing from the home, but it was as if it was bolted down to the dresser. She couldn't budge it.
Wow.
So I finished making the holy water, said the prayers of exorcism, started in one corner of the ground floor. I just started blessing every room. Making my way upstairs, I blessed every room, leaving her uncle's bedroom to the last one, and finally I had arrived there. So I could see the music box sitting on the dresser, and it was chiming away. And so what I did was I put my hands on it and picked it up. As soon as my hands touched it, it stopped chiming. And I picked it up with no problem. I mean, just lifted up off the dresser like
Sure.
any music box might. And I could see the keyhole in the side. It looked like, I mean, I don't know, like a typical music box from the outside. It's something that you could see in any kind of store that might sell something like that.
Sure.
But I opened it up, and Bill, there was nothing inside this box. There were no mechanical parts. There was no evidence that there ever even had any. It was an empty, plain wooden box with no parts inside it whatsoever. I could see the hole for the key, but the key went into nothing. So I put the thing back down. I blessed it with holy water, and then it never chimed again. That was the. I'm not going to say it's the last I ever saw that woman. That for her was a powerful faith experience. She became very involved in the church after that. But there was no diabolical phenomenon in the house any longer.
Hey, folks, in my life, the rosary has been powerful, and it's helped me through many, many difficulties. The Virgin Mary loves you and cares about you, and you don't have to be Catholic to pray it. The rosary can help you to do what Jesus is telling you to do. Get a rosary today at PelicanCatholicGifts.com. That's PelicanCatholicGifts.com, and get 15% off with discount code SHORTWAVE. A rosary makes a great gift. Help Quorum Radio. Buy a rosary today at PelicanCatholicGifts.com or go to WeLoveShortWave.com.
Were you in a state of high anxiety?
I never really have experienced anxiety with the devil. And maybe that's a weird thing about me. I just never have. So I was never nervous. I was never afraid. I just knew that I had a job to do and was focused on doing that job. The grace of the priesthood is necessary, at least for possession cases, the big possession cases. And I will say this, even non-Catholic religions have a deference to the priesthood that
Of the Catholic Church.
Exactly that even within Protestant denominations, that there is by and large a great respect when it comes to evil, and many of our cases come from Protestant denominations where they have tried whatever they could to get the devil out of this particular person and are unable to. When a priest comes in, whether the priest is Catholic or Orthodox, there are brothers in the faith in every way where we're not in full communion with one another.
Sure.
The grace of the priesthood is present within them. You're talking about a priest of Jesus Christ. That's different. Like that there is a difference within that. That difference is the ordained priesthood instituted by Christ, instituted at the Last Supper. And that means that Christ himself is present in a sacramental way. Christ as priest is present within that priest, and the devil responds to that. The devil respects that.
Among non-mainline Protestant churches, do you find a lot of them also have a grudging respect for the Catholic Church? Seventh-day Adventists, for example, among those, is there also among people who are its ministers and involved with pastoral activities a recognition that you have a real problem, you got to call the Catholic Church and its priests?
Yeah, certainly. There's, when the devil is there and you've exhausted everything and you see this person afflicted, your aunt, your uncle, your brother, then that has a way of setting theological differences aside. And we've tried everything else. We've tried medicine. We've tried psychiatry. We've tried prayers. Our congregation has gone up and down. We've had for 3 years people coming in and praying. Nothing is done here. And so now we've been told at every turn, call a Catholic priest. We've avoided that. And so now we're ready to try that. And there's a behavior then in the demon that is different. The demon himself will behave very differently in front of the presence of a priest. First of all, there will be a great respect, which is manifested by a disrespect, by an anxiety. It will be manifested by a greater belligerence, that the tension in the room goes up and you can say, wait, this is different now. Like he's threatened and he's reacting like a caged animal. And he's assuring everyone that the priest isn't going to do anything. And so that's different with everyone else. Like they, he just ignore their presence, ignore their purpose for gathering. The same thing does not occur when a priest is present.
So in other words, you could have a man of goodwill who's a fervent Christian believer, and they try to engage in steps or their own rituals of prayer and maybe hymns to I don't know what they do to try to give a deliverance, and it just doesn't work, or it just right, or what happens when they try to do it?
Well, it's not to say that it never works. Low-level demons, by the grace of someone's baptism, Christ gave his disciples the power to cast out demons. So that's right out of Scripture.
Sure.
But he doesn't say all demons, and even his apostles had trouble casting some of them out. And our Lord says, this kind can only be cast out through prayer. And this is all before
and fasting, right?
Right. Depending on the translation that you use of the Scripture, but yeah, some ancient manuscripts have just prayer. Others say prayer and fasting. But the point being that there are some that just can't be cast out at will, and these are even among his apostles. Now, what happens later is he institutes the priesthood. And that's different. That sets them apart. And so it is not to say that a non-Catholic or a non-Orthodox, a non-ordained member of Christ's faithful cannot cast out a devil. But I'm talking about the greater ones. I'm talking about ones that are entrenched, and that no amount of praying, no amount of gathering and supplication of the community, of the faith community, can get him out. Those are ones that when people call in the priesthood, those are the ones reserved for them. Those are the ones where the priesthood has great success, because the priesthood was designed to have that effect.
Sure. Father, let me ask you a question. Father Chad Ripperger, I guess if he would be considered a brother exorcist, I think he's an exorcist too, right?
He is an exorcist, yes.
He mentioned that John Lennon sold his soul to the devil. And I remember I had on I interviewed a Protestant Christian who we were talking about the Beatles and about this whole thing about being involved with a satanic pact and to give them fame and success. And apparently John Lennon was supposedly involved with it. I know there's a book by Joseph Niezgoda, if I'm pronouncing his name right, about this whole thing about I think it's called the Lennon prophecy. But the bottom line is that when I was interviewing him, at one point we had kind of a little bit of a confrontation. And I said, isn't it weird how John Lennon, and I had read a quote from John Lennon talking about Jesus was a filthy Catholic, garlic-eating Spaniard. He used some other words that are pretty terrible. And I said to him, isn't it funny how you think John Lennon was possessed? He said, yeah. So isn't it funny how he throws shade on the Catholic Church? And he said, yeah, it is kind of funny because it was founded, after Christ. I'm like, well, and I said, no, you are Peter upon this rock. I should build my church. And, so we started going back and forth on that, on that bit of scripture. But I wanted to get your take on, the Beatles, because they had an outsized impact, I dare say, on culture, on music, on life, on customs, on mores, on dress, across the board. Hairstyles. Do you have anything to offer about that? Any commentary on that topic? Because a lot of people will say, a person I know that I've worked with before, Zachary King, who used to be a Satanist, he said that there's a lot of, in Hollywood and in music, there's a lot of deals with the devil. Do you have any commentary about?
Yeah, sure. So making deals with the devil does exist. It is a thing. I can't speak whether John Lennon made such a deal. I just don't know. I don't know if he did. I don't know if he didn't. I just don't have any knowledge in the area. But I've certainly encountered people who have. And, the devil certainly makes He makes offers. And at the end of the day, every sin, in a sense, is a deal with the devil in that it gives him rights. It allows him, it's a manifestation, it's a repeating of his own rebellion against God. Each and every sin boils down to this. It is a rejection of what God wants, and that's the creed of the devil. Devil was created for a purpose, and his response to that purpose is, no, I will not serve. And he convinced 1/3 of the angels in heaven to follow him in that rebellion. And in that moment, their angelic nature became a demonic nature, a wounded angelic nature. They still retain most of their formidable abilities as angels. And I double underline formidable, because an angelic nature is much higher than a human nature. It's much higher in its power, much higher in its knowledge, much higher in what it is able to do. But in that moment, he made an irrevocable forever choice. So when an angel chooses, it's not like a human choosing. We make a choice, and then, at a certain point, we can come to get more information, come into a place where we understand something we didn't when we make the choice. We're more mature, etc., and we reverse our choice. I did this before. You know what? I reverse that now. I repent of it. Now I make a better choice. But for an angel, an angelic intellect is so profoundly sharp. It is, things are so clear for it. They're making a choice out of a level of knowledge that we just don't have. That choice, whatever choice they make, is made outside of space and time, meaning it's a forever choice. That an angel makes an irrevocable choice with every choice that it makes. It's making a choice with the knowledge outside of time, with an outside of time knowledge that this is a choice contrary to Almighty God.
Father, how long have you been, pardon me, a question. How long have you been operating as an exorcist? How many years?
I've been, it's the better part of 20 years for sure.
Wow. Plus your time in the seminary when you got pushed into it.
Right. Exactly.
And you were a de facto exorcist. I think at one time in seminary training, I think there's like a year when you're named an exorcist, right?
After being ordained a priest, yes. I mean, you can't be an exorcist in the Catholic Church before being a priest. It's given to a priest, but it wasn't long after that yes, I was named an exorcist.
Right. So, prior to all this, I mean, what was your view on the demonic? Did you think it was kind of like a symbol and mythology?
When I got the grace of conversion, that grace, among other things, encompassed an awareness that everything the Catholic Church teaches is true. It was a grace that I didn't have a difficulty with any part of the faith. When God revealed himself to me, he also revealed his church and the instrument that his church is, which is the pillar and bulwark of truth, which we're told in 1 Peter 3:15. So whatever the church proposes as true, what it proposes for belief by the faithful, I was game for that. And so the evil falling in that, I had no problem with the existence of evil. I knew that evil existed, and I knew that it was our job as church to combat it.
Right. And so, you've seen now, you were in Texas and the Galveston Archdiocese, I guess. You've been in presumably Detroit. You mentioned that in 2003, when you were starting out, they threw you into the deep end of the pool and said, hey, go to this address and they've got some problems. And so at that time, there was a tremendous amount of demonic activity, demand for exorcists and all. Has this remained, on par with today? I mean, has it increased?
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly not going away. And with the de-Christianization of Western culture and concomitantly its embracing of paganism, then the devils are running amok. And it's interesting because we're now coming into a place like we were in the early church. One of the great testimonies of the truth of the Christian faith was the fact that the Christian priests had success in casting out demons. And so the pagans that had it, because every society, pagan or otherwise, encounters the demonic. And so they'll have every culture, Japanese culture, modern and ancient, African cultures and so forth, South American, they have their own agency, their own shamans and so forth that will tackle the demonic, that will tackle these spirits that are encompassing and inhabiting individuals. But the Christian success in that had a powerful influence and ripped through ancient Roman society. And that bespoke to the inherent power of Christianity. So we're in that again. And one of the statistics that I found is, and you alluded to them earlier, the Pew survey people did a survey, and they found that within a 5-year period, and then they broke down the population into age segments, and in the 18 to 29 age group, in the 18 to 29 demographic, in a span of 5 years, 1/3 of that, the amount of atheists, the amount of people who abandoned formal religion, period, in that demographic increased by 1/3, which is a massive amount. Yet,
what do you attribute that to, Father?
Well,
Excuse me.
In the same, but a separate survey determined the same group, 63%, the same demographic, 63% of them believe it is possible to be demonically possessed. So in this demographic, which is increasingly abandoning religion, something is occurring in their lives that is making them conclude that demons are real. And I thought that is really interesting. So why are they abandoning religion? I think it's different for everyone, but certainly the fact that families today, there's a lot of inherent instability within families. People are growing up in homes with one parent. That has an influence. That will affect somebody's human formation. The fact that they're not being parented, even when there are two parents present. The fact that they're left alone and not given, they're not taught like they were before in a Christian-based society, the purpose for their existence. And so they have to make it up themselves. So so religion, faith becomes a mere ritual, one that they just can't simply understand. I think that has an awful lot to do with it. Faith is just not relevant to them. But yet, God has made us to be religious by nature. We're wired to want God. And so they're leaving formal religion, but they're embracing practices that are exposing them to evil. And for a great many, there is a fascination with evil. And there's a kind of, within a lot of young people today, there's an infatuation with the devil's rebellion as a concept, right? The rebel concept with the young people, and that's always there. It's natural for young people to go through a period of rebellion, but a healthy human goes through that period in a non-destructive way. That is just really not happening today because people haven't been advised, haven't been forewarned about the dangers inherent in playing with the demonic.
It seems now that the rebellion is institutional, promoted institutionally through the media, through prominent people attacking, in quotes, the patriarchy, attacking white supremacy, attacking all these. They create these big bugaboos, these huge sources of institutional and systemic evil, and weaponizing society against different members of society, or weaponizing one group to another, creating division, mass division. But at the heart of it, there's this tremendous rejection of authority. It's a tremendous rejection of patriarchy. To me, is an attack. An attack on patriarchy is an attack on God, but it's happening, and it's very prominent. And you also have, of course, the attack on the Catholic Church. How many exorcisms have you performed, counting the ones dealing with infestation?
Oh gosh, a great many.
And all of them. The ones where there's full demonic possession, obsession, where somebody's being acted upon by the devil, but they're not possessed, but they're being vexed by the demon mentally.
A great many.
Hundreds, right?
Hundreds, yeah. I have files. I keep a file on each case, and that file I never discard. I keep it locked in a vault. But I've never gone and counted them because they're increasing all the time, and but it would be hundreds easily.
Right. So, I mean, an exorcist is kind of like he's obviously a priest first and foremost, but he's also, right?
He's an investigator first and foremost, right? The job of the exorcist is not to cast out the devil. The job of the exorcist is to find out, why is the devil there?
Why is that important?
Well, because if you don't remove the rights that he's gained, then he has every right to be there. Just like you in your own home, your next door neighbor can't have you removed from your own home because you have rights to be there. He doesn't. He doesn't have the rights to your dwelling. But if he's able to gain them, he's able to gain the deed to your property and home, and he wants you out, then you have to get out. And so that is, in a nutshell, the job of the exorcist, is to find out what rights have been gained. And his job then is to help the victim rescind those rights. Because, look, in most people's mind, there's this notion that exorcism is the priest coming in and he's kind of going face to face against the devil. So he's hammering him with prayers. He's hammering him with the other tools that his faith equips him with. And basically, because he's empowered by God, then he's able to outmuscle the devil. And that is absolutely not what happens, because he's never going to outmuscle the devil. There has to be an undoing of those rights that have enabled the devil, the demon, to gain access to where he is.
Right. So
that's about aiding the victim in undoing that. Whatever choices were done, whatever turning away from God, or if it was brought, if the state of affairs was brought out by, for example, a curse, or if it somehow has been present in the generations, there's such a thing as generational sin. That the devil gains. Every sin is a rebellion against God, and every sin, in addition to being an offense against God, damages the human community, the entire human community. But there are some sins that are so visceral that the covenant that is formed remains within the family line. And that's alluded to in Deuteronomy chapter 5. I will visit the sins of the parents down to their children, down to the third and fourth generation. So they're not going to be guilty of the sin, but they receive the effects of the sin. And, original sin, the sin of Adam, that's an effect of generational sin. You and I, we never ate the forbidden fruit, but we were born bearing the penalty of original sin. David and Bathsheba, David conceived a son with Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah. The baby had no fault in the matter, but the baby was struck dead as a result of the sin. Right? So that's an example of generational sin. And that occurs. So that is among the areas then investigate. Is it the case that there could be a generational sin here that is evident and is being that the devil is standing on those rights? So we take the rights away in order to get rid of the devil.
I guess this then brings me to the next question: is that if you have cases like this is really an appalling thing that a grandfather, grandmother does something, and maybe the child, the victim, the son or the daughter, now an adult, or the grandchild doesn't have any knowledge about this at all. So then how do you find out? So first of all, what I do is I exhaust the obvious.
I look for personal sin within the individual and lead the person through a repentance of that. If that doesn't alter the effect, then I start looking at other things. And so we have our ways of, over time, of investigating that. So I will proceed to ask them about what do you know about your family? Does anybody else in your family complain about the symptoms that you are experiencing? And if the answer is yes, because it almost never strikes just one person in the family line. It strikes several. And so I proceed from there. Tell me about that. When did this start? How did it come about? And so at the end of the day, in other words, I'm looking for patterns. Even the devil has to act in patterns. So his activity is not random. It's never random. It's designed. There's a design in it. There's an intellectual aspect that can be discovered through investigation.
Right. So, Father, at some point, you exhaust your investigation by ordinary means, and then you have to turn to extraordinary means. And there's times during an exorcism when I guess an exorcist, basically interrogates a demon, right?
Right. So there always is the ordinary and the extraordinary, as you've just defined it. There always happen side by side. So there's a use of prayer and a use of the intellect at every step of the way. But you're right in the sense that when the exorcist starts praying, that is going to flush out the devil if he's present, because his prayers are, for lack of a better word, kryptonite to the devil. The devil is wounded by that praying, and so he will typically emerge in order to defend his quote unquote life and property.
Right, his territory with that person that at some point permission was given to possess.
Right.
So so then of course we have the role of relics, we have the role of the Eucharist. I understand. Is the Eucharist ever used as a tool to fight a possession?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, if for an exorcism of someone possessed, if possible, we always perform that within a chapel because of the presence of the Eucharist. Right.
So, I understand. I mean, I interviewed Father Vincent Lampert, and he mentioned to me something about how an exorcist can get into physical danger if he doesn't. There's a certain prayer that has to be said beforehand, I think. Is that right? So that he's protected from and members of his team, because he goes in there oftentimes with other people who are praying or assisting in some way, right?
Yeah, you never perform an exorcism, a solemn exorcism alone. You have people there that are intercessors. You have stout men there that if necessary, they're there to hold the victim down. They're there to hold the demoniac down, so that the priest himself can perform his work and not get hurt in the course of doing it. But there is no, he prays, but there's no kind of set prayer that if he doesn't pray that, he can be attacked. He can be attacked nonetheless, but certainly he prays asking God for protection. There isn't one single kind of prayer that he prays that kind of protects him and he never will get hurt. I've been attacked myself in the course of exorcism. One time I was hit in the head so hard I needed 2 surgeries to repair the damage to my skull.
Wow.
So that isn't that there was something missing in the prayer or there was something lacking in my petition, my praying it, but the fact that God, for whatever reason he chose, permitted the devil to do this on this day. And we just have to live with that. Wow. God is present. God is defending his people. God is defending his church. But God allows these manifestations and these actions for his own purpose. And I don't always know that purpose. But we take the good and we take the bad, knowing that we're serving God, and that has to be enough. He gets to choose what happens.
To be continued on the next episode of Quorum Radio.
Roger Miller, Charles Drusella Rents.
50 cents. No phone, no pool, no pets. I ain't got no cigarettes. I'm at 2 hours of pushing broom buys an 8 12 bedroom. I'm a man of means by no means. King of the road. 3rd boxcar, midnight train. Destination Bangor, Maine. Whoa, worn out suit and shoes. I don't pay no union dues. I smoke old stogies I have found. Short, but not too big around. I'm a man of means, by no means. King of the road.
Quorum Radio now on with Charlie Sansom. If you're wondering who he is, well, I'll tell you all about him. He's a political commentator who famously quit the Conservative Party group chairmanship on the BBC Essex Live program over its COVID-19 Plan B and the tyranny that he saw connected to it. I don't blame him. He's also a singer and a DJ. His website is www.charliesansom.com. I'll repeat, www.charliesansom.com. Unless you wonder how to spell Sansom, well, I'll tell you. S like Sam, A like Apple, N like Nancy, S like Sam, O like Oscar, M like Mother. Sansom. CharlieSansom.com. So check him out. Check out what he does. He's a guy that has no use for PC thinking, and he's basically a two-fisted brawler in the political scene, right?
Exactly right.
Looks like he gets a big fist, man. You could get somebody to run for the money in a street brawl, but we don't want to talk about such things. Oh, goodness gracious. So, but we might. But anyway, I want to talk about the Bonfire of the Vanities 2023 in London, and it's all about this Lawrence Fox controversy with Dan Wooten, and how the media has had an attack of apoplexy over the victim, Ava Evans. And to give a little context first for this, tell us what it's all about and tell us why it's relevant for people, not just in the United Kingdom, Scotland, Wales, the Channel Islands, but also in other countries, why this is important and relevant, because you are the canary in the coal mine. Tell us what's coming next.
Well, you've mentioned a lot of countries which ordinarily wouldn't care about these kind of things, but the media have their ways of making people care about the trivialities of media personalities maybe overstepping the mark. Now, I watched the clip and the scandal unfold, if you like, in real time, and I found it quite funny. I won't lie. You know, I've never once found a problem with somebody saying what they wouldn't do. So Lawrence's crime, the scandal, is that he said, in the context of Ava Evans being a fourth wave feminist who doesn't have any respect for men, doesn't care about male suicide, openly advocates for men to be fearful of women, he said, why would any self-respecting man want to be with her? And he's put more to the point,
have sex with. Anyway, just a little cultural translation. That's what we do at Quorum Radio.
Yeah,
Charlie, I'm sorry.
Indeed, yeah, no problem. It's we have to kind of work out what slang works for in the UK and what slang doesn't in the US. But yeah, so he basically said that because of her views, he wouldn't like to be in a relationship with her, wouldn't like to sleep with her. Some people would say it was quite a crass comment to make, which I suppose there is a lot of sympathy for. But it's not the first time something like this has been said on British TV. But the previous time, even recently this year, less than 6 months ago, it was said on Piers Morgan's show over here in the UK. He had a guest on that asked another guest the same question in relation to Sam Smith. There was no outrage, there was no uproar, there was no cancellation, no one losing their jobs, no scandal. But because Lawrence said it about a woman, well, that was the minute.
Terrible.
So that's essentially what the big hoopla is over here at the moment. I mean, hopefully it will die off, but I doubt it, because
I don't think it's gonna.
No, when you give leftists and feminists an inch, they will take 1,000 miles. It's gone from an inch to a mile. It's 1,000 miles now.
So Charlie Sampson, folks, you got to check him out.
It's charliesansom.com.